The distress beacon had been pinging for 3 standard weeks before the Meridian's hope picked it up. Captain Celine Kale stood on the bridge, her dark eyes fixed on the wavering signal that pulsed across the holographic display. It was weak, erratic, and originated from a moon that wasn't supposed to have any settlements at all. "Ma'am, we're approaching the source," Lieutenant Ramos reported from the navigation console. "It's definitely artificial. Multiple heat signatures, but they're faint." Celine felt the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders. 3 years exploring the outer colonies had taught her that faint heat signatures usually meant one of two things: abandoned outposts or dying inhabitants. Neither was ever pleasant to discover. "Take us down," she ordered. Full medical team on standby. The moon's surface was a desolate landscape of gray rock and ice crystals that glittered like scattered diamonds under the system's distant sun. As the ship descended through the thin atmosphere, the settlement came into view. A cluster of dome structures that looked hastily constructed, their metallic surfaces dented and corroded. What Celine saw through the viewport made her breath catch. Dozens of small figures moved between the domes. No, not moved, stumbled, crawled, dragged themselves across the frozen ground. They were covered in fur that might once have been sleek and vibrant, but now hung in matted clumps. Even from this distance, she could see they were children. "My God," whispered Dr. Chun from behind her. "They're just kids." The landing was smooth, but the scene that greeted the rescue team was anything but. As the airlock hissed open and Celine led her crew down the ramp, she got her first close look at the inhabitants. They were feline, unmistakably so. Pointed ears, whiskers, tails that barely twitched with life. But these weren't the proud Feliner warriors humanity had encountered near the Scorpius Arm. These were cubs, no more than equivalent to human 7 or 8-year-olds. Their eyes huge and luminous with fever and fear. One of them approached on unsteady legs. Her fur was a patchwork of orange and white, matted with dirt and what looked like dried blood. She couldn't have weighed more than 30 pounds, her ribs visible through her thin coat. When she looked up at Celine, her golden eyes held a strange mixture of hope and resignation. "Please," the cub whispered in broken standard, her voice barely audible through cracked lips. "Help, sisters, brothers." Celine dropped to one knee, ignoring protocol, ignoring the potential danger. She pulled off her glove and gently touched the cub's forehead. The heat radiating from her small body was alarming. "We're here to help," Celine said softly. "What's your name?" "Naira." "Naira Solon." The cub swayed, and Celine caught her before she collapsed. The small body was burning up with fever, trembling violently. "Dr. Chun, emergency triage now." What followed was controlled chaos. The medical team moved through the settlement, finding 247 feline cubs in various stages of illness and starvation. The story pieced itself together through fragmented accounts from the older cubs who could still speak coherently. They were refugees from the Feliner colony world of Kestera, evacuated when a plague swept through their population. The adult caretakers had loaded the cubs onto whatever transport ships they could find, sending them to this remote moon with supplies meant to last 6 months. That had been 8 months ago. No relief had ever come. The supplies had run out. The heating systems had failed. The water purifiers had broken down. And one by one, the cubs had started dying. Celine worked through the night, coordinating with her crew to transform the Meridian's hope into a mobile hospital. The ship's cargo bay became an emergency ward, filled with small, furry bodies wrapped in thermal blankets, connected to 4 drips, their shallow breathing the only sound in the vast space. Naira Solon remained conscious longer than most, perhaps sustained by sheer determination. She lay on a medical cot, watching Celine move between patients with tireless efficiency. "What?" Naira asked when Celine paused to check her vitals. "Why help us? We are nothing to humans." Celine looked down at the small face, at the intelligence flickering behind those fever-bright eyes. She thought of all the reasons she could give: diplomatic relations, moral obligation, the prime directive of humanitarian aid. But in the end, she spoke a simpler truth. "Because you're children," Celine said, adjusting Naira's blanket. "And children shouldn't suffer. Not human children, not Feliner cubs, not any children in this galaxy. But resources, food, medicine, your ship." Naira's voice trailed off, exhausted by the effort of speaking. We'll manage, Celine replied firmly. Humans are very good at managing when it matters. And they were. Over the next 72 hours, Celine's crew performed miracles with limited supplies. Engineer Morrison jury-rigged the ship's water recyclers to handle a capacity 3 times their design limit. Chef Rodriguez stretched food rations with a creativity that bordered on alchemy. Dr. Chun and her medical team worked in shifts that stretched far beyond human endurance, treating infections, setting broken bones, coaxing small bodies back from the edge of death. It be why the 4th day, only 3 cubs had been lost, 3 too many, but so many fewer than the dozens who would have died without intervention. The survivors began to recover, their fevers breaking, their eyes regaining focus and life. Naira Solon was among the first to truly recover. She sat in the medical bay, her orange and white fur freshly groomed by one of the nurses, eating synthesized protein paste with an enthusiasm that made Celine smile despite her exhaustion. Captain Kale, Naira said, setting down her meal. I have been thinking. In our stories, in Feliner history, humans are complicated. Sometimes friends, sometimes not. But I think. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I think I understand now why other species fear you. Celine raised an eyebrow. Fear us? Yes. Naira's golden eyes were serious, ancient wisdom somehow present in that young face. Because you are relentless. When you decide something matters, you do not stop. You do not calculate cost. You just do. This is terrifying and wonderful. Celine felt something warm bloom in her chest. We're not so different from you, Naira. We just believe that some things are worth any cost. What things? Life, hope, the future. Celine gestured around the med bay, where dozens of cubs were playing, eating, laughing, living. Your future. The Meridian's hope limped into Frontier Station Kepler 2 weeks later, its resources depleted, its crew exhausted, its cargo bay filled with 244 recovering Feliner cubs. The station's docking control actually gasped when they saw the passenger manifest. Within hours, the story spread across the colonial networks. Within days, it reached Earth. Within weeks, a full relief convoy was dispatched to locate and reunite the cubs with any surviving Feliner adults. Naira Solon stood with Celine on the observation deck as they waited for the transfer shuttles. The young cub, healthier now, her fur glossy, her eyes bright, pressed her small paw-like hand against the viewport. When I am grown, Naira said quietly, I will remember this. What humans did, what you did, and I will make sure all Feliner remember. Celine knelt beside her, meeting those remarkable golden eyes. Remember this instead, that in this vast, cold universe, kindness still matters. That's not a human trait, Naira. That's a choice every being can make. But as Celine watched the young Feliner board the relief shuttle, watched 244 saved lives disappear into their uncertain futures, she felt a fierce pride in her species. Humans were complicated, violent, territorial, often foolish. But they were also this. People who would push their ships and themselves to the breaking point for children they'd never met, of a species they barely knew, asking nothing in return but the chance to do what was right. That, perhaps, was the most human thing of all.